Okay, we are live, which is perfect. Now I'm starting. So, hello everyone, and a warm welcome to our Power BI and Microsoft Fabric Community Meetup. My name is Ilgar Zarbaliev. I'm Microsoft Data Platform MVP and MCT Community Lead, and I'll be your host for today's session. Today's topic is Intelligent Pipelines in Action, AI, collaboration with Fabric. And it's a truly exciting one. We'll discover how AI and Fabric can work together to automate, enrich, and scale data workflows beyond traditional reporting. And um, so this event is part of our ongoing effort to innovate, educate, and inspire. And a quick reminder, you can always stay up to date with our community events by visiting this link. I will be sharing this link in next minutes. So this session dives into a real proof of concept project that blends AI orchestration with Microsoft Fabric pipelines. And now meet our speaker. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest speaker, Victoria Eshelby, joining us from the Netherlands. I hope Victoria will give the necessary info about herself, but let me give a little bit info about her. Victoria is a senior technical trainer, AI and machine learning engineer, and Azure cloud architect with extensive experience designing enterprise data solutions. She's working in Microsoft in the Netherlands office. I hope I'm talking correctly. Uh, and a little bit about just upcoming speakers. So we're going to have Rafsan Hussein from USA, Linda Larkan from USA. She's also coming from Microsoft, and Maya Shenhab from Israel, from Microsoft Office in next months. Now a little bit about meetup rules. So this session will be recorded, actually is live streaming on YouTube channel. And I kindly ask you to stay muted during the presentation unless speaking. You can drop your questions anytime in the chat, and we'll address them during the Q&A session at the end. And a little bit about the session schedule. The first 5 minutes is all about introduction that I'm doing right now. And then I will deliver the stage to Victoria Eshelby. She will go on with her presentation and demo. And at the end, we will have our Q&A session. Here, I would like to stop sharing my say screen, and I would like to deliver stage to Victoria. So Victoria, stage is yours. Thank you.
And hello, Fabric and Power BI community. It's lovely to meet you all. So my name's Victoria, as been introduced. I'm the technical trainer at Microsoft. I will do a bit of an introduction at the end, actually. So today, what I'd like to do is share my progress regarding a proof of concept, which reminded me of just how fast data engineering is evolving and how adaptable we need to become, especially in the data engineering and the platform subject matter as platform and subject matter experts. So my background is specifically in AI, working with data science related solutions, which is really great because my LinkedIn feed is full of jargon right now. It's mostly surrounding things like agent-based frameworks and these large language model discussions, I should say. And when I apply these discussions to the data engineering perspective, the real challenge is creating these ETL pipelines, right? That can capture, transform, and monitor the data in which we can then eventually support these intelligent systems. And when I talk about intelligent systems, I'm not just talking about integrating these AI, artificial intelligence APIs, but also we're now starting to introduce agents, which if you're not working with them, these are things which are capable of performing tasks such as scraping information from the web, generating output like summaries and recommendations, And sometimes, especially for those that have worked with agents, you may have found that it's not entirely accurate nor consistent, but it's useful enough. And hang on, let me just get everything right. It's useful enough that we are willing to accept these shortcomings and now try and identify ways to address them. So we have this whole new layer of integration and consequently a whole new addition in our checklists of considerations. And these considerations should be including things like how can I trust the output of the data and where specifically is this agent extracting the information from. And here is the reality. Oh, here's the reality. Over 80% of these AI projects that we work with, right, they tend to fail before production. And this could be due to poor data collection, unclear scope, sometimes weak data governance, sometimes just cost. And so the question becomes, how do we design these ETL methodologies that not only utilize AI, but also create this rich environment that can support high data, high quality data? And how can I be utilizing the tools in my Fabric toolbox and beyond, right? We're not just working with Fabric, we're working with different solutions. So my goal today is to share my journey regarding this proof of concept, particularly focusing on the process of where I am, where I'm going, and to share some of these considerations with the aim that I inspire a few of you to start thinking about not only developing these solutions, but developing them in a responsible and transparent way. So is what I'm going to show you the most super duper ultimate solution? No, it's not. It's just a proof of concept, right? And a disclaimer for everyone in today's call, it's going to be, it still is a work of progress. And so, but I still wanted to share the story anyway, and talk about my decisions and share how I've utilized Fabric for designing my intelligent systems. So just so you know, in the chats, I can see the chat. If you want to share your thoughts, please throw them at them in YouTube, in the chat, and we will address some of these questions as well at the end, as well as if you want to see how you're working with these solutions as well. So that's what the Q&A session will be focusing on at the end of this session. So let me give you a bit of context surrounding the project. So in this proof of concept, we are working on this thing called voice of the customer. And what that means is, as trainers, we are trying to identify and see if the materials that we are developing are is in line with what our community is interacting with, right? The Fabric community, you all that are part of this session, right? You have interests, and we need to make sure that we're aligned and we're presenting material and we're creating material that is aligned to your expectations as well. So we obviously have internal documentation, and there are teams at Microsoft that are focusing on that, but externally, we're not really utilizing the web. So their Microsoft technical training team got together, just a few of us there, got together, and we decided to build a system that utilizes this agentic framework. So on the left, we had the deep researcher tool, which is part of the Copilot, but initially, we implemented it inside of AI Foundry, and that takes data that's creates a whole research surrounding what is available based on our use case, and then stores that into a storage account. And then from the other side, we have to represent these findings, and we used an example which was sentiment analysis, which you can get inside of a tool called AI Search, which is like a vector database solution. Now, there were problems with this. Well, mostly there were challenges specifically. So as I said, there was a group of us working on this project. And we were using, as trainers, we get our own subscription. And each individual was working on their own subscription. We separated the tasks between us. And so one of them, which I've shared his name, Peter Detender, he was focusing on the AI Foundry component of this. Another trainer named Juliet Rajan, she was focusing on the output of how our users, for instance, the senior leadership team, would be utilizing the output from this. So to make sure that we are keeping in line with the voice of the customer. And we also had a bit of a debate internally in the team. Like, for instance, another member of our team named Gil decided, hey, let's just evaluate how Copilot does. And so we had half of the group wanting to work on AI Foundry, half of the group wanting to work on Copilot Studio. We decided to merge it together. And what we noticed as at near the end of this specific pipeline was that the data and the output each time we ran it, every single time, would be inconsistent, slightly inconsistent. It might change, it might tweak. There was no although it was the themes were there, the output changed, which meant that we couldn't truthfully rely on the methodology, right? We have these agents which are scraping the web. We need to be able to trust this, and we need to be able to design these systems that allow us to trust this. So now enter subscription 3, which is myself and my colleague Maya. And we decided, hey, we should try and figure out how we can go about this. And can we utilize, for instance, our data, our Fabric environment in order to try and validate, in order to try and dive into the components of this, right? And so just as a framework, all of the users in our project, right? Everything sort of defaulted on the storage account. So for the time being, as this is a proof of concept, we just basically extracted the data from the storage account. And then eventually we can connect these agents up using this thing called an MCP server, Model Context Protocol, if you haven't come across it, to then interact with the additional agents and beyond if we decide to expand this project. Now, so far, and again, as I said, this is work in progress. So far, we've focused on duplicating the data from the storage, duplicating the data from the notebook side of things, and building a pipeline. And that's what I'm going to show you today and the progress, as well as thinking about like the next steps and shared resources to the group regarding this as well. So in terms of the pipeline methodology, I would say, in terms of like this methodology that I was working with, my colleague Maya, she took the data that we had, and she was able to sort of say, here's a URL, take the data, save it as a PDF, do this schema that I designed, plug that into the storage account, and then we will work from there. And from that point onwards, the system is what you see in front of you. We had to check the existing materials. I'm going to share with that when I jump into the Fabric side of things. We had to try out the use case to see how it worked and what worked well with it. We had to cater and tweak some of the schema that I designed, because again, it's an iterative process, right? I'm sure our data engineers in this call can be nodding their heads as we work through it, and then use the skill sets that we have, right? Fabric has that the capabilities that if you are if you prefer working with SQL or PySpark, or if you prefer just using the clicky button kind of methodology for your transformations, you can work with that. So it was utilizing my skill sets, which is mostly in the PySpark framework, and transform this into a pipeline. And as I said, that's what I'm going to show you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of all of these different steps, and then talk about some of these things that have changed. And I'm really glad I waited a little bit, because this month they've released some changes regarding the Fabric MCP and agentic framework. So just know there's parts of this I am still ironing out in the background. So let me just jump into Fabric. I'm hoping everyone here is familiar with Fabric from a data engineering perspective, and if not, just know that what I would like to do and what I'd like to show you today is basically that process, right? So I wanted to look for existing materials. And in one of my resources, hang on, let's see if I can get that up for us. In one of my resources, this was one of the resources at the time when we were starting out the project that I saw, I was very grateful for. It is also now integrated as a template inside of Fabric, but it's basically working with this RAG-like environment. So instead of using AI search, we'll be using Fabric. And when it comes to utilizing that, right, you can look at these deployment of these pipelines. Hang on, let me just see if I can find one. Might be a buttony clicky boy somewhere here, right? So there's these templates that you can work with. And I believe this one was integrated at the time, right? So there is this ability where you can build your own API. So I started from, I didn't decide to reinvent the wheel. Reinvent the wheel. I decided to utilize the templates that I had and see how it works. And in this specific template, the author Arun, a very lovely guy, he decided to create this CV, like basically some sort of agentic pipeline, which takes in CVs and allows you to explore it. Hang on, let me see if I can find his little GIF reference, right? So looking for candidates and retrieving it. And that was exactly what we needed. But not from a CV perspective, but from this voice of the customer's perspective. So I took this data and then I played around with it for a little bit. I started experimenting with this environment, and the output of that resulted in something that looks like this. So this is my little pipeline that I worked with. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so we don't have to squint our eyes as we look at the screen. So what you will notice is I kept some of the features inside of Arun's initial template, right? So again, just copying, I could use the copy activity if I wanted to change from the Azure blob to the lakehouse. But then after what I discovered was after I followed his specific pipeline approach. Let me see. Do I have one here? Maybe. If I click this button, let's just find out what happens. Okay, I'm just going to zoom in here. But what I found out with his specific approach was that he'd be using these internal for loops to generate embeddings. And he's interacting with, for instance, one of these models where, let me just see if I can find it. He's working with, scroll, these embedding models. And I thought, okay, we're going to work with this as well. But what I found with, for instance, in this voice of the customer template environment, is that in my specific use case, and let me show you what that data looks like once it's ingested, or not because it's decided to delete. It's up there. In my specific use case, where are you? Here we go. Let me just load this into a pandas just to hopefully that it doesn't break. We'll find out. It's a JSON file. What ended up happening was it was loading crazy amount of data into one specific column. So when I was trying to embed this data column, this specific environment, the model suddenly just stopped. And it basically, I would say it completed, but then it also said 403 request or 402 request. Like the require, okay, this one doesn't work. Let me just see if I can scroll up into my initial approach, right? So as an example, let me click on this button, this full text, right? So I had this huge, this is data that's been scraped from the web. And it resulted in the embedding model not being able to work. So I had to rethink how this pipeline was done. And I went to my comfort zone, which was PySpark notebooks, right? So that was my little happy space. And I built a pipeline in the notebook as my test using this specific like data set that I was dealing with, which was generated from Maya's schema. And as a result, I essentially went through my own schema methodology of what he had written out in that blog, in that link that I would share with you shortly. And yeah, walked through it, created like understood the data, added in like data cleaning methodologies, added in a hash ID, right, of the data title and when the date it was published, so that we had a way of identifying the data itself, right? So this was what we generated from Copilot Studio. So there's quite a few columns in here regarding the sentiment of the document, examples of like the types of topics that are included, specific keywords that might be useful later down the line, as well as links that were included in those web results. So this is what you would use AI to extract. And then the goal was to try and address the problem of, for instance, a runes environment. So this is where we started to think about smart chunking, and as a result, I basically started to go into my data, and instead of using a singular, let me see if I can find it. Instead of using like a whole snippet of code, I just used sentences. I chunked it based on the maximum value I could based on the large language model, and I started to chunk the data. And I now know how this data is going to be split across my data environment when I eventually store this as a delta table in my storage account, or if the project goes into gets green light lit, then we go into the data warehouse side of things. But for instance, this sentence, to apply context between these different types of chunks that I created, would eventually it uses the previous sentence as a starter. So it will allow it to navigate between each part of the data within that. And this allowed me to eventually start thinking about, okay, now that it's chunked, how can I go about looking into like designing this data so that it can be utilized? Because if, for instance, I use this data set, right, this is just one file, one like little file that we ran, and it already has 23 rows. And from a long-term perspective, that's not going to be beneficial when we connect it to an MCP server. Maybe we want to split the data up as to what is necessary, what is important for us. So I split the data up. Hang on, let me scroll down into two components. One, which has the main information about it, including that hash ID that I incorporated, the title, the summary, no longer has that full text associated to it, but it is basically it also included embeddings of the topics of the keywords that I included. So I could when I plug it into the MCP, I can use cosine similarity, Jacobi's similarity. I can apply these similarity indexes similar to what AI search does to evaluate whether when someone goes, hey, can you find me like what is the current trend around AI right now? That it's able to go, right, I can find this very quickly. So I split it up into that component. And then the second part of it is the chunking part, right? So we had all of these chunks that were created, and I basically made this data so it could be split, right? So if we wanted to do a deeper dive, if we were basically go to the agent and we go, hey, where are you getting this information from? It can pull out the specific part of the text that we're extracting from. Because again, the main part regarding like the main problem regarding these kinds of models is you are placing implicit trust that the deep researcher AI foundry can find the right and relevant tools. And it's been shown that it's not like 80% of the time it does, 20% of the time it will refer to references either through hallucination or through this thing called synthetic data generation. Like for instance, the web is generated, I think 74% of the web right now is human combined with AI generation, and like 2 to 3% of the internet right now is complete, like the web page has been completely AI generated from. And so it can potentially pull from that. And that's a big problem that we're now needing to start thinking about and incorporating into our pipelines to start validating this. So that is something that we need that's why I focused a little bit more on the chunks, because then I can bring this in, have it reference specific material to just double check, like we can come up with a validation. I can write a function to come up with a validation method. So once I came up with this approach, right? So it takes the data, writes the pipeline, does this. This is what I'm going to show you now in pipeline form. I took the data based on a runes methodology, And let me just minimize this now. And I separated each of these specific commands into functions. What do those functions look like? Let's see if I can find them. So they are using Fabric user-defined functions to support me within these API calls, within the requirements of the API calls. And I will tell you, my learning from this whole thing is that when you run a Fabric function, it doesn't utilize the PySpark or it doesn't utilize the Spark framework. And that was something that I was quite shocked at, actually. It was my learning from this whole process. It uses Python, which means that I had to transform like the output when I was transforming it into Delta back into a notebook, into my pipeline. So just that was my main learning from a data engineering perspective. But I basically wrote, I used Copilot to help me translate what I'd written into these functions, to then eventually be utilized and saved into this simplified-esque pipeline. And there is, as I said, still a lot of work to do, but it does all of the steps except for writing that final step. That was my last component. So again, going back to the task, right? I started off with you not reinventing the wheel. I took it from a previous project, right? But I had to create everything a little bit from scratch, regarding my specific use case, utilizing my own skills inside of Fabric, and then transform this into a more automated process. So that when the agent goes into the storage account and oh, my dog decided to run out the room. When the agent goes into the storage account, there is the that threw me off. Goes into the storage account, it can trigger, the pipeline gets triggered into the pipeline environment, right? So I have these variables that when something gets added, it stores the file name, the container, and the location. So now this can be automated that when I run that pipeline, it is able to store it. Now, as I said, work in progress. There are two major things I need to start focusing on and adapting to and thinking about. But I really want to emphasize why it's important to start thinking about how you design your databases and your vector databases. Because when I talked about like the synthetic data being acquired, we're using agents. We are trusting agents, especially when it comes to the web scraping. If you have a project for that, you are trusting the agents to do data extraction. And one of the most important things that we need to be aware of is that the data quality will affect how we go about the response. So maybe you've come across the term garbage in, garbage out. If, for instance, this agent is scraping from like it finds a completely AI generated text, which has that 80% correct, 20% hallucinations, and that's treated as a true resource, and then our agent picks that up, saves it, and triggers that whole pipeline, then you're going to get this garbage in, garbage out environment. So we need to be able to identify these data defects and assume data validation and data quality and incorporate those into the columns. So one way of that I address this, or at least I started to focus a little bit on, is in my schema generation. Let me see if I can go back to the original. Let's see if this one's fine. In my schema generation, I started to add comments such as relevance score, confidence score. And these are things that you can either have it human, you could use like existing validation tools that look at that validate the text to try and identify if it's human or AI text generated. This is also things like thinking about adding in columns. So in our situation, in our system, we are allowing humans to also add their own feedback. So adding in columns that says, hey, this was AI generated. Hey, this was human generated. And this allows us to establish a little bit of trust where we can also come up with A/B testing to evaluate how these two environments come in. And we need to really think about how we intend to design our KPIs to evaluate like the drift, basically. So synthetic data drift is as we start absorbing this AI generated content, how does it influence, how does it affect the concepts that we are dealing with? And then adding in, especially because we're not using AI search, adding in things like re-rankers, cross-encoding, that when we do these cosine similarities, it's pulling out the highest relevance score, right? So that pulling out those columns where it has the validation and referenced methodology. And you can use agents to create these tables, right? These columns, so long as they are specifically different from the ingestion pipeline. And the last thing that I thought about playing around with is Fabric data agents, right? So we have these data agents that can be utilized to support us in, for instance, answering some of these questions regarding the data itself. There's now an API integration environment. Let me just click on the resources here. Let me find it, the one I want to share, right? So they have, is it this one? It might be this one. But they've started to incorporate these agents to interact with Copilot, to interact with within the Fabric environment. And lately, maybe a few days ago, last week itself, there was the introduction to working within graphs. So this is a slight update from that template that I shared previously from Arun. They've now integrated these graph technologies into the Fabric environment, into the Fabric sphere, so that we can now connect our MCP server directly into our environment to support us in developing, like extracting the data that's a little bit relevant. So yes, returning back to the point is that we can utilize these components to support us in validating the data. I don't think, from my perspective, I don't think we are at the stage yet where we can trust agents to do our entire data engineering pipeline. And so this is why I say we should be using them in collaboration. You can use them to support. We're just adding additional workload to us, right? Additional toolkits to incorporate into our framework. But yeah, see them as our collaborators. Know that you can build these pipelines, you can build these data environments inside of Fabric. Again, Lakehouse versus Warehouse depends on your preference, right? Depends on the flexibility that you need. And then start thinking about how, if you are utilizing these topics, how do you go about introducing them in a way that you can build reliable systems, in a way that you can validate the data that is coming in. So again, my name's Victoria. Thank you for your time today. Any questions?
Sorry. Thank you very much. There are two questions in the chat. I kindly ask you to have a look.
Let me see if I can get this up.
Yeah,
there we go.
Chat, yeah.
And also, just so you know, in the lineup with Linda Larkin, she's a lovely person. So you do have a wonderful lineup ready. Let me just jump in. Please type the questions. Scroll. Scroll. How can Fabric pipelines be used to detect data quality issues? So it's not so much about the pipelines themselves that are going to be identifying the data quality issues, but what you are going to use in order to identify them, right? So it's going to be the programming terms that you're going to be working with, right? So you're going to, like, for instance, in my situation, I have written these out as Azure functions. So it's going to be from my side how I'm going to be evaluating this, right? So when I talked about these columns, right? So human, AI generated, adding in these value scores surrounding the notebook, right? So the relevance scores, you can potentially incorporate those into your data BI and filter and add in like metrics to filter that. So that would be one way of detecting the data quality from that side. I would also encourage you to, from a use case side of things, let me see if I can pull this up. From a use case side of things is run specific testing on the data itself. So this would be creating a whole checklist to go through when it comes to data quality. So looking at this skew in data, looking at the, as I said, these data shifts that are happening, adding those into those checklists of evaluating if there are changes over the last month that should be investigated further. placing human in the loop review to evaluate these data quality pipelines. And yeah, so it's the main goal I want to say here is that your engineers will need to design this. Your engineers will need to think about this. And there's also a resource I was preparing for this, but you need to add in this evaluation framework into it. And let me see if I can find it. Is it this one? I think it's this one. Let's see. No, it's let me find it. There's one I'm specifically looking at, but hang on. Fabric agents evaluation. We're just going to check. Right, so there are these evaluation frameworks. So this, for instance, the data scientists in your team or the machine learning engineers are going to need to start thinking about adding in specific metrics. So for instance, you have these ground truths that you can set up. So utilizing this agentic evaluation framework, using this to, like, similarly to how it's done within AI search, they've incorporated it into the Fabric API as well now. So that would be another way I would suggest regarding like detecting these data quality issues. I'm sure there's open source tools, for instance, to track data drift from I'm trying to think from my machine learning. I know there's tools that exist that you can use this for open AI. Not for open AI, but for like the data quality itself. But yeah, just you're going to have to start coming up with tracking methods and logging methods to figure those out and add those into those checklists. I'm hoping I answered that question, and if not, you need to make that clear and then ask Ilgar further questions that I can add in extra in addition. And
Thank you
then
very much. Yeah, there is one more question. Please go on.
I was jumping into the next one. So the next one is a logistics company wants to predict delivery delays using AI. How can they integrate this into their data pipeline? So the scope that you would need to work with is, I'm trying to think from a logistics side of things. You're gonna have the data ingestion side. I would propose that you would, hang on, focus a little bit. So this is more like the utilization side of it, but I guess it can also count from a process side of things. But you can sort of start thinking about how you could use AI to start tracking the amount of data that's coming in, right? So using the system to start thinking about like how quick, how to process this specific like output of what your specific use case. It's a little bit too vague of a question I'm thinking right now. But I would from that side of things, yeah, I would be creating an agent, for instance, to support you in let me think. You would design the data ingestion side from a human side of point of view. And then you could potentially use an agentic flow to connect the data up to say, hey, what is the status on this specific process? What is the status of this specific pipeline? What I would encourage you to do is check out. I'd say just take the proof of concept that I shared with the references. Take this first one, take a look at it, and then apply your use case to that specific problem based on the data that you have. But you're going to need to start thinking about how you're going to go with the project guide, how you're going to go about designing this framework. There's a agentic framework that I'll also share in the chat as well. But deciding how you're going to interact with it. But yeah, so it really is going to depend on your use case.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Beho says that he has some basic questions, and he asks his questions at the end. Says that, can you give some examples or ideas about problem statement where we can apply this? So all over
problem statements being as in like apply these pipelines and these checks. So I would probably say as part of your checklist. So in front of you on the screen is a lot of like information, but it's basically saying how do you go about identifying the data in terms of your problem state in your environment. And when it comes to the ETL, it's more or less about how can we ensure that there's going to be some form of evaluation that we're utilizing if our company is using AI, because this is now becoming a very common topic, how we're going to go about evaluating our outputs. So some examples of how you would go about designing your fabric pipelines would be, do I want to utilize embedding in our design? Do we want to trust? Do we want to use AI search instead? Right. So this is, for instance, one example. This could also be, do I want to like the level of granularity that you want to go into this agentic framework? So do I want to use Fabric do I want to use a Fabric data agent to retrieve the data that I'm interacting with? Do I want to just see if like it can give me the total sum of the data I'm interacting with? So once the data is set up and you've added these additional like columns for checking the data is set, yeah, that shouldn't. Yeah, I'm hoping I'm answering your question.
Yeah,
But I, yeah.
sorry for interrupting you. And Jose says that any more info about chunking? I,
So in terms, like I can go a little bit into the chunking side of things. I can also happily share this. But what I found when I was looking at Arun's work with his chunking was that it was basically taking in the column row that you were dealing with and developing chunks. So from my side of things, I basically took in the maximum characters of my subscription could take. So there's a certain amount of tokens that you need that are utilized when you're working with these embedding models in AI Foundry. And I ran into those upper limits. And so what I wanted to do is essentially figure out like the maximum amount, but smallest amount that I could use to start separating the data into this chunk. So I came up with this smart chunking strategy that utilizes those sentences based on this maximum length. So depending on your subscription, depending on like the restrictions that you have, if you are integrating these API requests, check those limitations out, and then design your feature based on like the tokens and translate that to characters. And if I remember from the top of my head, it's like a 75 to 100 ratio to tokens. So for every 100 for every 100 tokens, you have 75 characters, that kind of thing, in terms of string text.
yeah, that was the last question. With your permission, I would like to share my screen for last slide, and then I will give you one information about Fabric. I hope it will be in your interest. So, with your permission, I would like to share my screen, Victoria. So, yeah, let me. I hope my screen is visible, right? So, as we close, don't forget to stay connected with our growing data community. So, this is the link that I shared with you. And for any questions or collaborations, feel free to reach out. And once again, thank you all for joining today. A huge thanks to Victoria for her insightful session and to everyone who continues to support and inspire this community. See you at our next meetup. Until then, keep learning and keep innovating with Fabric. So here I'm just going to stop sharing. I hope I will come. Or maybe, did I share my screen or not? Not. I'm sorry. So, so this was my slide. So I hope you heard my voice. It's okay. What I would like to share with you is that let me tell you, in these days, Microsoft Reactor organizes Fabric Data Days in study groups. So you can, open Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel where you can find the necessary info. You can join to these study groups. And at the end, Microsoft will provide you with free of charge DP 600 and DP 700 exam vouchers. So this is a great chance. So from one point of view, you will have an opportunity to learn fabric data engineering, and from other point of view, you will have an opportunity to take this exam at no cost. Thank you for also sharing this info, Victoria. So I would like to ask one question, and then we can just close this session, Victoria. Okay. Is there any way to increase the validity of, I mean, the number of validity of a fabric trial? Actually, it's given for 60 days, right? So you can use fabric for free of charge for 60 days. Is there an opportunity to increase the days or not?
Currently there isn't, but I would normally just tell if you want to increase the there's a little bit of a shortcut, truthfully, which is you can set up different email addresses and then jump into that way. That would be like the way you can experiment with it, but there isn't like a formal way of going about it. Alternatively, you can set up a fabric capacity that's very cheap inside of your Azure subscription, and work from like just utilize that 'cause, yeah, those are the
Uh,
two ways.
yeah, the issue is that for example, I mean, to apply all the knowledge of all the labs that can be found on Microsoft Learn
Mm-hmm.
documentation, you have to have at least trial capacity,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you, for example, if you are going to buy, I mean, less than capacity, I mean, less than trial, so I don't think that you will be able to apply all the necessary labs. So, but trial version is, if I'm not mistaken, costing a little bit more. So, yeah, I think there is one way. Thank you.
It is a
Okay.
sneaky way of doing it, and that's the one I wanted to share. But yeah, I would
Uh,
probably say like the business side of things, it's you'd have to ask your business to apply you a license. If your company is utilizing Fabric, but from a user, like from a personal perspective, you only have those 60-day trial. Um, so that
yeah,
was
yeah. Actually, this way also I'm following.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you once again very much.